Man, so excited to see everybody here. We announced it last week, but just to share with you again, some exciting things are coming up here at Merge.Church. We've got circles launching first Wednesday. We've got all that, but our 2-year anniversary is October the 6th. Come on, somebody. And to celebrate, we are going to add a second service time because as you look around, there's not a lot of empty chairs, and we're called to grow, right? We're called to expand. We're called to take ground, and that's what this series has been about. But listen, we're going to need your help. We're going to need your help over the next 4 or 5 weeks to invite people to share what's going on here, to share what God is doing, not what we're doing, but what God is doing. And people need to come be a part of it. There is plenty of lost people all around us in Crawford County, Arkansas, and that's our duty to go get them. And that's why we've been talking about. We've been talking about throughout this series that the church is a movement, not a monument. My prayer at the very beginning of the series was that you would get to the end of it, and when you heard the word church, you would no longer think of a building, but you would think of a movement that Jesus himself created to go and to bring everyone into his kingdom that could possibly be brought in. And we kicked off week 1 talking about the real Jesus and how we want people to know God. We want to introduce people to the real Jesus. And to know the real Jesus, we have to know the attributes of Jesus, that he was authentic and relevant and accepting and powerful. Second week, we talked about how, man, once you know Jesus, that's great. But sometimes you wake up that Monday after you accepted Jesus and you're like, I still got all the same junk in my life. I got all the same problems I had, and I'm just not sure what to do. And it's our job as a group of believers to help people find freedom, that Jesus has a dream for their life, and that we want people to continue dreaming. We want people to continue pursuing and chasing and growing until they can let go of all the past and find true freedom. And last week we talked about that a dream with a plan is a purpose. A dream with a plan is a purpose, that whenever you know that there's a purpose for your life, you have vision. You have vision for where you're going. And we use the illustration of my son Ben riding his four-wheeler, standing on it and looking back. And he runs straight into a truck because he had no vision. He wasn't looking forward to the destination. He didn't know where he's going. And so many of us wander around life like that. We're just unsure where we're going, and we're unsure what our purpose is. But when we have vision for our life, what we find is that we have focus and endurance and fulfillment. But to have that vision, we've got to ask ourselves, what should I stop doing? What should I start doing? And we ended with, why not now? Why not now? Why not start it now? Why not stop it now? Why not start living with purpose now? And today we're just going to continue talking about it. I told you guys week 1, I said, I know when a pastor talks about growth, everybody's like, man, the pastors, they're just all about numbers. And it is true. And I hope you all dream about this saying at night. You've heard it enough over the last 4 weeks, at First Wednesday, all of that. We care about the number of people going to heaven, not... That's terrible. We care about the number of people going to heaven, not... We're called to grow. We're called to reach. We're called to stretch. We're called to take more ground. We are not called to survive. We are called to thrive. He ordained his local church to be a movement, not a monument, not something sitting still, not something not breathing life. He called it to be something moving and reaching people far from God. I've said it, and I will say it again and again and again and again until I take my last breath. We want some people to walk in here that still got the booze on their breath and the weed on their clothes. That's fine. Uber here from the club. I don't care how you get here. We're going to share the gospel with you. We're going to love you right where you are. And we're going to be less concerned with everyone's external and more concerned with their internal, because when we introduce them to the real Jesus and they become spirit-filled, he'll fix the external. He'll take care of that hard work. It's our job to go out and to reach. It's our job to make a difference. So what we're going to talk about today is making a difference. You know, I have a 6-year-old son, Collier, and he's a rascally little rabbit. I mean, he is just wound up tight from the moment he opens his eyes to the moment he closes them. I mean, he just goes and goes and goes, but he has a great big heart. And I tell you guys a lot of funny stories about the goofiness of Collier and the things that he does. But dude has a heart the size of a watermelon. And I love it about him, but it costs me a lot of money. You parents know what I'm talking about. Like your kid comes home and they're like, yeah, man, I want to make a difference in the world. Somebody at school needs X, Y, or Z. And you're like, well, we got to buy it, right? Like we got to take care of them. He's trying to reach people. His thing this week was apparently if you ate at Chili's on Thursday night, they gave part of the proceeds to Rena Elementary School. So he's dead set, right? All he talked about all week was we got to be at Rena Thursday night. We get Chili's. We got to be at Chili's Thursday night. We got to be at Chili's Thursday night. We got to be at Chili's Thursday night. And he gets stuck on something and he'll just wear you slick. I mean, wear the tread right off your tires. You got nothing left. You're like, just puncture them and deflate them. I can't deal with you anymore. All right, well, go to Chili's. Stop. And you're going to get a whooping when it's over. I can feel it because you're way too wound up, you know. But those of you that have kids or have raised kids or have been around kids, what you know is that kids want to make a difference. They really do. Kids care. It's unbelievable to me. I remember my senior year of high school. I worked at Parkview Elementary with something. It was like, I loved being around all those kids because they cared. And then all of a sudden we come up through like middle school, we care a little less. In junior high, we don't care about anybody but ourselves in junior high. In high school, and now everybody's got a phone. I know what they're doing with those phones in high school. I was a lawyer before this. You better be looking at your kids' phones. I'm just saying. Good parenting advice. Hashtag check them. And we get into adulthood and it's such a grind. Is that okay to say? It's a grind, right? Monday's coming, Tuesday's coming, Wednesday's coming, deadline's coming, bills are coming. Payday seems like it's never coming. Everything's going on. And all of a sudden, it's like we lose the simplicity of wanting to make a difference in everyday life. We lose the simplicity of it in the chaos of our world. And that's why we've cautioned you throughout this series. Listen, if you're going to live your God-given purpose, you're going to have to say no to some other things. You're going to have to prioritize your life and be willing to say no. And when you do, when you're ready to say no and you've planted your feet, like, I'm going to say no to all that, I promise you're going to get some really good offers. Every time you fast, somebody invites you to 21 West End. Every time. But you've got to plant yourself and be willing to make a difference. We exist for the world. The church exists for the world. We don't exist for every believer sitting in this room. Only organization on earth that exists for the benefit of its non-members. If you know Jesus, we're not here for you. Some of you really you don't like that. You've heard it for 4 straight weeks and you still don't like it. We want to pastor you, we want to love you, but we want you to walk in purpose. We want you to walk in freedom. We want you to be the church. We want you to reach lost people. And we look around and it's like bad stuff's everywhere. Our natural inclinations to turn to politics. I'm not going to preach politics, don't worry. It's not going to happen. But the church is the answer. And if we would spend a little bit of time taking what we believe to the world instead of taking everything the world has and letting them bring it to us, we would be amazed at what God would do for us. In Matthew, Jesus talks about that the gospel will be preached to every nation. That word is ethos. Every people group. It's an unbelievable thing. But you know, today we're going to talk about the story of Noah. We're going to talk about the difference that he made. But first, Matthew 24:37. It said, as it was in the day of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. I love that phrase, as it was. As it was in the day of Noah, because that tells me that it is identifiable. That we can recognize it, that we can point it out, that we can be a part of it. And some of you know the story of Noah. Hopefully some of you don't. Hopefully some of you are sitting in this room and you're like, I don't have a clue. But Noah's the guy that built this great big boat. And it seemed crazy that he was doing it at the time. And Noah is actually one of the stories that a lot of people like to refute in the Bible more than about anything. Now, they'll agree with you that there was a great flood because there's a lot of scientific proof about that, but they will refute this idea that one guy built a boat and he took his family on it and 2 sheep and all of that. Here's what I got to say about all the things that we struggle with, because listen, I come from a very logical background. I used to teach philosophy classes, okay? Like I know what logic is and I understand it well. Here's what I accepted in my faith. That God is not limited by my logic. That God is not limited by the size of my brain. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. That's a really good thing because God isn't held back by what I understand. I heard a story of a girl who wrote a midterm paper on Jonah. Jonah lived in the belly of a whale for a while. And her teacher came to her and she's like, this is ridiculous. There's no way that it's scientifically feasible that someone could live in the belly of a whale for that long. So I don't know why you're writing about that. And the little girl, she kind of stood up for herself. She's like, no. Listen, story's true. All right, I wrote a good midterm paper. I deserve a good grade. I'm not going to redo it. This is real stuff. And so she gets in this squabble with the teacher. And the little girl finally says, you know what? When I get to heaven, I'm just going to ask Jonah myself. And the teacher says, yeah, but what if Jonah isn't in heaven? And the little girl looks at the teacher and says, then I guess you'll be asking her. I love kids. Genesis 6, 5 through 8 says, the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thought of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But it's always really important to stop when the Bible says but, in case you were wondering. Good place to stop and pay attention. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So it'll be at a time when the earth is living as it was in the days of Noah, that Jesus will make his return to rapture his church. And if it's our job to reach everybody we can reach, then we got to grow and we got to stretch and we got to go, because we want people to know God, find freedom, discover their purpose. And we want to make a difference in this world. It's important that we understand, but Noah found favor. And here's why it's important that we understand that. Because God's solution for all that's going on in the world is you. God's solution for everything that's going on in the world is you. You're the solution. You're the solution. He's called you to go do the work. He's called you to go make a difference in somebody's life. That's why we care about it. God's hope is that you'll make a difference. Do you ever think about what you want on your tombstone? Just me. This Acts 13 and 36 says, for when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. What better thing to be written on your tombstone? For when Jacob had served his purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. For when Bridget had served her purpose in her own generation, she fell asleep. You know what I love about that verse, though? It says that David fell asleep because we don't taste death. We exit one body and enter heaven. We don't taste death at any point in time. When you understand that and you grasp that, you want the world around you to be changed by that truth. That you don't have to taste death or defeat. That you get to walk in freedom and purpose, knowing the real Jesus and having a real relationship with him. We're called to make a difference, but how? I'm going to give you 3 places to start. Number 1 is make a difference for those closest to you. Make a difference for those closest to you. This is our first calling, is to make a difference for those closest to us. Genesis 7:1 says, the Lord then said to Noah, go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. The difference made in your life is going to make a difference in the lives of those closest to you, good or bad. When I was in junior high, I've told you guys before, but I played football for Coach Steve Jones. And he was one of my favorite coaches in the world, and I don't know why, because he was a mean cuss. He'll tell you that. I'll tell him that. We're still buddies. But Coach would inevitably look for the one scrub on the team that was doing the wrong thing. And remember, I'm in junior high, right? So there's always that one idiot. Always that one guy that won't listen, that won't do the drill with any effort. And if we didn't force the guy to do the right thing, then we, the entire team, got to bear crawl and roll hundreds for all of practice. Over and over and over. Because he cared if we made a difference. He cared if we did something in someone else's life. You see, the difference that God makes in your life is going to first reach those closest to you. So if you'll focus on those closest to you, you're going to know if you're making a difference. If those around you aren't being affected and impacted in a positive way by your growing relationship with Jesus, then you're not going to make a difference beyond that, because we're first called to make a difference to those closest to us. I'm first called to my wife, then I'm called to my kids, then I'm called to this church. I'm called to make a difference with those closest to me first. And notice, listen, I love you guys, I really do. But notice the order there. Your spouse first, then your kids. Boy, we flip that one. We get that one wrong a lot. Spouse, then kids. If your marriage is broken, it's hard to be a great parent. We got to make a difference with those closest to us. Acts 16:31 says, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household. That word household is the Greek word oikos, which really just means a sphere of influence. A sphere of influence. I think sometimes when you preach a message like this, everybody wants to wonder, what's the pastor's agenda? This one doesn't always feel good, right? I like the feel good ones better than these two, but we got to make a difference. I'll tell you what my agenda is. My agenda is for you to have at least one oikos moment. Meaning you have a moment where someone sitting next to you that you have invited to church slips their hand up at the end of service and has tears coming down their face and they accept Jesus for the very first time. If I can get you to have one oikos moment, I promise you'll be addicted to inviting lost people to church, because you'll want to see more of them around. You'll want those closest to you. Here's a challenge. A minimum of one Sunday a month, you should have someone lost sitting next to you that you brought to church. That's 12 a year. 12 opportunities for an oikos moment. That's a minimum of what we should be doing. Some of you are like, I don't know any lost people. You should go make some friends then. Who are you going to lead to Jesus if you only hang out with churchy people? Unchurchy people are typically more fun to be around than churchy people anyway. It's true, and y'all know it. Imagine if we all invited one lost person every month and actually got them here. We just drove them nuts until they showed up. What would happen if you could have one oikos moment? One moment where someone close to you comes to know Jesus and they know God, and then they begin to find freedom, and then they begin to discover their purpose. You've made a difference at that point. Number 2 is we're called to make a difference for our generation. That's why we've been talking about how we're in a season of here and now. I pray that every day that I make a difference in this generation, that one day someone can write on my tombstone that Jacob served his purpose for his generation, that he made a difference for those closest to him, and that he made a difference for his generation. That everything changed because he was willing to pursue the generation of those around him, that he was willing to pursue with reckless abandon. He was willing to chase everybody that he could chase, and he was willing to preach the gospel. You should pray every day that God uses you to change your generation, to impact your generation, to have an influence on your generation. I love to invest in the people younger than me that I would still call my generation. I love to invest in the 20-something-year-olds and the 25-year-olds and those that are somewhat close to me, but I've just got a little more life experience than them. And it's not even altruistic. I love it because I love those guys and they keep me youthful and they're risk takers and they're bold and they pull me in a direction I need to be pulled. But I love it too because when I invest in them, here's what they're going to do. They're going to invest in my boys. They're going to invest in my kids. They're going to keep passing down and loving and caring and shaping. All we have to do to reach the next generation is invest in our generation. If we'll invest in those closest to us and in our generation, that generation will be ready to reach the next generation. I can't wait for the day. I'm not trying to give up all this time, but I cannot wait for the day when I'm the old guy up here and I'm like 55. I got everybody under 55. And everybody on this platform is 18 and 19 and 20, and they're challenging me, and they're pushing me, and they're encouraging me, and they're making me want to pull my hair out. I can't wait until all of us that have kids that are down and Merge kids and under look up and see that generation running this place and doing more than we could ever imagine or think of. We got to reach those. We got to make a difference in those closest to us. We have to make a difference in our generation. Jeremiah 15 and 19 says, you're to influence them. Do not let them influence you. We're called to make a difference in this world. Number 3 is we've got to make a difference for God. We've got to make a difference for God. You know, God's looking for people. The only time Jesus really comments on something that directly applies to this world, he says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. The harvest is plentiful. There's plenty of lost people to reach. The harvest is plentiful. And I love that because he says the harvest is plentiful, meaning it's not just the crop that's plentiful, but literally it will be harvested if we're willing to make a difference. It's not just a crop. He's saying the harvest, you're literally going to go get it if you're willing to be a worker. You're literally going to make a difference. It's a promise. It's a yes and a moment, yes and amen moment in our lives when we realize listen, I don't just have to chase this and then nothing's ever going to come from it. If I'll be the worker, the harvest will be there. If I'll be the worker, the harvest will be there. He's looking for you. He wants you. He's counting on you. Each and every one of you. He's counting on you to make a difference to those closest to you. He's counting on you to make a difference in your generation. He's counting on you to make a difference for him. 2 Chronicles 16 and 9 says, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him. He's running to and fro. His eyes are looking everywhere for those loyal to him, and he wants to show himself strong to us if we're willing to make a difference for him. You know, we got to give a shout out. How about all the people that are taking care of our kids right now? Huh? How about we give a shout out to the most powerful guy in the room? It's not me, it's Ricky. He's on the soundboard. Dead serious. Matt running the cameras, Jordan running computers, right? They're saying, I want to make a difference, and I'm willing to do whatever it is that I have to do to make that difference. I'm willing to be a worker. Ezekiel 22 and 30 says, I looked for a man among them who would build the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land so I would not have to destroy it, but I found none. He's looking. He wants you. He needs you. He has a purpose. He has a vision. He has a dream for you. He wants you to have a real relationship with him. Are you willing to make a difference? Why would any of us say no to making a difference for God? And it's real simply put, it's one word, fear. Fear. Some of you in this room, write this down. You're afraid of your past. You're saying, man, I would love to make a difference, but you don't know me. You don't know the mistakes that I've made. You don't know the history that I have. You don't know the screw-ups. You don't know the broken promises. You don't know the criminal record. You don't know what I have done. I don't. I don't know. And that's okay. Because Jesus didn't build his church, his local New Testament church, with a bunch of religious people. He built it with a bunch of ordinary, common, everyday Joes that had plenty of screw-ups and mess-ups and mishaps. The dudes that literally walked with Jesus hand in hand, that saw him perform miracles, still denied him, still accosted one another, still lost their cool, still screwed up over and over and over. David, a man after God's own heart, committed murder and adultery. Listen, I don't need to know what happened in your past. I need to know, are you a worker today? Are you willing to make a difference today? Are you willing to have a purpose today and a vision for your life? Are you willing to do the work to make a difference for those closest to you, for make a difference for your generation? Are you willing to make a difference for God? We can't be afraid of our past because the past doesn't disqualify us. And I would argue the exact opposite, in fact. I would argue that to build a church in today's world, you're going to have some people in some leadership positions that have some really ugly past, because their past is exactly what qualified them for that moment, for that opportunity to reach the lost and dying world of today. God's not looking for perfection. It doesn't exist. It's not available. He's the only one that's perfect. He's just looking for availability. He's looking for a willingness. Romans 11:29 says God's gifts and God's call are under full warranty, never canceled, never rescinded. The gift he's given you, the call he's placed on your life doesn't get canceled. It doesn't get rescinded just because you stumped your toe and did something stupid. It's still there. It's still present. He's still ready to use you. He's still willing to use you if you'll make yourself available. But for some of you, you're going to have to let your past go so it can let go of you. You're going to have to let it go before it can let go of you. Second thing that we're afraid of is the crowd. Thank God Noah wasn't, right? Thank God Noah wasn't afraid of the crowd. I can just imagine it. Kristen and I were actually driving up to Northwest Arkansas yesterday to eat lunch and watch a movie with the kids. And we're on the way up, and I don't even know why we were talking about this, but she said something about all the female characters in the Bible, and she was like, I'm just not sure which one's me. And I was like, you're Noah's wife. And she's like, I don't remember the story about Noah's wife. I was like, I don't either. But I can just imagine that Noah's wife was sitting inside watching him swing his hammer and build this ark thinking, you're a fool, but I love you anyway. I was like, that's you. You sit there and just watch me keep swinging this hammer saying, you're a fool, but I love you anyway. Afraid of the crowd. Proverbs 29:25 says, fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. Colliers finally reached that age where he gets ashamed of me every once in a while. That's a soul-crushing moment. Somebody should have warned me about that before it happened to me the first time. I feel like those of you older than me with kids failed me. You did not make a difference for me in my life. First time it happened, I will never forget, but we're standing in line, and there's some older boys in front of him, and we're going to play a game. And he looks at me and says, I got this, Dad. I was like, okay. He says, no, I got this, Dad. Okay, fantastic. I got the money. You got nothing. And then it kind of clicked with me. He's a little bit ashamed of old Dad. He wanted to stand in line by himself. He wanted to be a man on his own. He wanted to stand strong in that moment. He didn't want Dad nearby. That's good. That's part of his growing up. I want him to be strong and independent. I want him to be bold. Pray that over him every night, that he'll be bold. Even if he's bold for the wrong thing, by God, be bold. Do something with purpose. Do it with intentionality. But far too many of us live this life ashamed of God. I've had a lot of those moments. I ran for about 15 years because of it. I grew up in a little bit of a church culture that it was almost hard to invite your friends to, you know. Like it was tough. Like we got crunk for Jesus. And I'm thankful for that. But it was hard. And I got into my teenage years, and it was like I was ashamed. Like I didn't want to put myself in that boat and in that category of the overly religious, churchy people. And I became ashamed of God. And then I had this wake-up aha moment when I was in law school of like, God loved me even when I was ashamed of him. That's reason enough to not be ashamed. He loved me even when I was ashamed of him. Surely that's reason enough to not be ashamed of him. But we walk around and it's like we're ashamed of God and all that he's done and all that he's doing in our lives. So we give him zero credit for anything going on. And then we wonder why we're not making a difference, and we're wondering why we get sucked into the crowd, and we're wondering why we're afraid of everything happening. Listen, the only one in your life that won't fail you is God. It's the last person we should be ashamed of. We've got to stop walking around ashamed. To be a difference maker, you've got to be more concerned about obeying God than looking foolish. Noah looked like a fool, but he was obeying God. Noah was mocked and ridiculed, but he was obeying God. He was making a difference for those closest to him and protecting his family. He was making a difference for his generation because he gave them hope to continue on after the flood. He was making a difference for God in his obedience. And the last thing that we're afraid of, if I could get Greg back, is we're afraid of taking the first step. I took Collier to swim lessons this year. I took him a couple of days. And one day it was cold. I mean, it was cold. And my boy Caleb here was his swim coach. And Caleb made the greatest mistake anybody can make when they're getting in a cold pool. Right? We all know the best way to get in a cold pool is just to jump in. Right? Take the shock. Take the initial blast, but it's over in an instant. But we're unwilling to do that because the first step's the hardest. It's not the fifth or the sixth or the seventh. It's the first one. It's the first step to making a difference that's so difficult. It's the first step towards making a commitment. It's the first step towards making a change. It's the first step towards inviting someone to church one day. It's the first step towards sharing your faith or giving God glory for something and being unashamed. It's the first step that is the most challenging. Hebrews 11:7 says, by faith, Noah, when warned about the things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. He took the first step. And his faith was rewarded. And he's a difference maker as a result. We camped out a series ago studying Elijah. We talked about how he was in the cave running for his life from Jezebel. She had put out a hit for him, wanted him dead because he had embarrassed all the false prophets. And he's in that cave, and an earthquake comes by, but God went in the earthquake and a wind and a fire, and God's not in any of that. And then a gentle whisper speaks to Elijah. And I believe now more than ever that that's how God does a lot of speaking. It's in gentle whispers. Gentle nudges. But when we're ashamed, when we're afraid of the crowd, when we're afraid to take a first step, we can't hear it. And for some of you in this room, I can tell you God's whispering to you. He's saying, don't do it. Don't do it. Stop going down that trail. Stop living that life. Stop putting yourselves in those circumstances and situations. Just don't do it. For some of you, God's whispering, do it. You know what to do. You know where to go. You know the step to take. You know the difference I've called you to make. Just do it. Just do it. For some of you, he's just whispering, hang in there. Just hang on. Keep fighting. Keep your head up. Keep looking at me. Keep hanging on. I promise you're going to come out the other side. No storm lasts forever. No trial will ever defeat you. You will have victory. For some of you, he's just whispering, take the risk. Take the plunge. Do something bold. Make a change. Be willing. For some of you, he's whispering, apologize. Probably to all of us, he's whispering, apologize. Some of you are like, I didn't do it. It's not my fault. And I know that may be true. But it doesn't mean you can't apologize and get a relationship back that you long for, whether you were wrong or not. Doesn't mean that you can't correct something. For some of you, he's whispering, get help. You can't do it on your own. You got to quit living isolated. You got to quit fighting the addiction or the depression on your own. You've got to quit fighting the broken relationship and the past on your own. Get help. Let somebody help you. Let them pour into your life. For some of you, he's whispering, slow down. Take a deep breath. Enjoy what's around you and what God's doing. Enjoy how he's moving. For some of you, he's just whispering, there's more. You're not living in fullness. You're not walking in all that I have for you, but there's more for you. For some of you, he's just whispering, it's time. It's time to do it. You know, and it's time. For some of you, he's whispering, you can do it. Encouraging you, giving you confidence to hold on to him and say, I can make it. But the last thing that we're afraid of, put me at the top of the list on this one, is failure. Terrified to fail. I've been fighting a second service, kicking and screaming. You want to know why? Scared that it'll fail. Scared it won't make it. Scared it might hang out there for 6 months and never fill up. And then we're like, I don't know, do we rescind it? Do we back up? Do we punt? I've got fears too. And failure's always lingering. Feels like it's always a moment away from me. Feels like it's one day, one mistake, one screw up. That's how the devil works on me. You might lose. You're going to screw this thing up. You're going to mess it up. Genesis 9:13 says, I have placed my rainbow in the clouds. Why? As a sign of my promise until the end of time to you and all the earth. You think, a sign of what? And Matthew 28:20 tells us, it says, and be sure of this, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. If you don't hear anything else, here's what you need to understand. You're called to make a difference because you have Jesus with you always. Everywhere you go, the question is, will you? I stuck one of these on every seat in this place. If y'all pull it out with me. It's kind of a ruler looking thing. I want you to find, and I want you to fold this over at the age you think you'll live to. I'm going 83. I'm going to preach till I'm 82. 83. And I want you to fold it there and then tear it off. You can take that part and put it in your pocket because that's the part going to heaven. That's the good stuff. And then I want you to take it and I want you to fold it at the age that you presently are. 33. Sorry if you're over 55. And tear that off. And you throw this away because that's your past. That's done and it's finished. And then you look at what you have left. That's your time to make a difference. This is all the time we have to make a difference. This is all the time we have to build His church. This is all the time we have to share the good news that is Jesus. This is all the time we have to introduce someone far from Him to Him. This is all the time we have to be His hands and His feet. Someone showed me that and it messed with me for the last 3 weeks. I've got one of these in my office, just sitting on my desk staring at me every day. This is it, Jacob. You got 50 years. 50 years to chase it. 50 years to build it. 50 years to do it. Are you willing to make a difference? If we could bow our heads and close our eyes all across this place. For some of you, there's inevitably just a simple question of am I willing? And if you would be honest enough to say, Jacob, I'm struggling with if I'm willing to make a difference. Would you just slip your hand up? I'm not going to embarrass you. Just want to pray with you. If you say, I'm having a hard time. And some of you in this room are inevitably saying, I don't know what the difference is. I don't know what difference I'm supposed to make. And I want to find it. Would you slip your hand up? Say, I want to find the difference that God's calling me to. I'm willing. I need to see it. Heavenly Father, God, we ask that you would touch every person in this room, that you would reveal yourself to them, and God, that they would see you and that they would be available, that they would willingly be your hands and feet, that they would go and do the work that you've called them to do, that they would be difference makers in their homes and in their generations, that they would be difference makers for you, that they would set aside all of the fear and that they would look at you and you only. God, that you would reveal to them the difference that you're calling them to make. With every head bowed and eyes still closed, if there's anybody in this room that would say, I don't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, that's the difference maker for you. And if you would be willing to say, I don't have it, but I want it, I'm not going to embarrass you, but if you would just slip your hand up, I just want to say a quick prayer with you. Let's all stand to our feet all across this place. We're just going to end real simply. We're going to sing of how great our God is. So if you want to make a difference, that's the place you start. You stand in awe of how great He truly is. If you want to find your difference, you just recognize the greatness of our God, and inevitably you will find the difference that you're called to make in this song. So man, feel free to find a quiet place to sit and pray. If that's what you feel like you need to do, to come up front, feel free to kneel. We'll be happy to pray with you. But let's sing this out like we mean it, because we're called to make a difference.